Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Lunch Tech and Chat. We're probably going to have to change the name of this podcast because my friend Will is not in the same time zone as me anymore. That's why this episode is being recorded remotely. How are you, Will?
Yeah, good. Yeah, now it's gonna be breakfast and lunch chat for the future. Good. Yeah. It's feeling good. Feeling good. It's our first trial here since the beginning of the year. It's been a little bit crazy in the last few weeks. So how's life been for you, Andre?
Yeah, crazy. I had a nice break in the end of the year. Was sort of trying to stay off the grid as much as I could. But man, now coming back and all these AI race going on the world, China against the US, new Cold War on AI, Europe a bit left out. I know they're trying to come back with Germany, or not Germany, with France on Mistral, Le Mistral, or however you pronounce that in French.
Yeah.
And yeah, the war is on, man. This for anyone that works with AI, they must be having as a crazy time as I am.
Yeah, it is there is huge amounts of development, which comes like both like from a technical perspective, there is a lot of very interesting things actually coming into the market, but also kind of like it's getting all mixed up with the whole also kind of like geopolitical situation, which is interesting. We don't always kind of like go too much into that geopolitics of things, but unfortunately, for a technology that is so important like AI, things are kind of being muddled.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like after all those announcements, for example, on DeepSeek, I know DeepSeek's not the top one anymore, like old news. But after that, I know Sam Altman was saying, "Oh, it would be love to collaborate and work with China," but that would be impossible between the US and China. There's a bit of a cold war. Chinese government pouring money on AI, all these new AI companies coming with like open source or free models, which is crazy because like how are they running all this shit and paying for it? And then in the US now you're seeing Donald Trump sort of announcing sort of the government helping on the Stargate project where they're gonna build those massive data center infrastructures for AI. So crazy times. And then we have Elon Musk saying that he wants to buy OpenAI. Don't even remember like 100 billion or something like that,
Yeah, close to that.
increasing the value of the, let's say, open source side of the company or the non-profit side of the company to make harder for Sam Altman to make that a non-profit. So yeah, crazy times, man, crazy times. I know you've got the agenda, so I'll leave it with you to drive us through this podcast today, Will.
Yeah, if you want, we can maybe get started with kind of like get the I guess political side or geopolitical side of the conversation first as we started with this, and then actually kind of like evolve towards more like the technical things, just to change a little bit the way that we usually do things. Usually you go down on technicals, and then kind of like we have a little bit more like society kind of like discussion. So yeah, so I think that thing on the setup for the next year was really done over the last weekend. There was a Paris summit on AI,
Mm-hmm.
and essentially during the Paris summit on AI, which was organized by French President Emmanuel Macron, he essentially invited most of the alliance players, plus a few, friends and relatives, if you want, if you consider that a family, and essentially was the U.S. and then some European leaders there, plus also like some like Asian leaders like Modi was there as well in the summit. Of course, the non-invitees of the summit were the
Russia.
Chinese and Russians, but that's kind of natural in that context. And actually, the highlight, the real big highlight that I would say, and that sets the tone for the rest of the year, if not for the rest of the next couple of years, was a speech that J.D. Vance, which is the Vice President of the United States, did to the European leaders. And in a nutshell, what he essentially told them is, America is gonna focus on development of its own AI. Is gonna focus on maintaining its leadership and its edge on AI. And you either join the boat or you'll be left behind. But we are not gonna be the ones kind of like over-regulating this industry. We want to see it moving fast and breaking things, and everybody else eats dust. That was the gist of his speech to the European leaders, and you could see in the room the eyes were quite glacial towards him in a way, like, oh my God, they are not going to stop. And this was kind of like reflects a little bit kind of like the current state of affairs, which is kind of like since Trump assumed assumed office and has all of these, the biggest AI companies in the United States kind of being part of his closer circle, they are exerting a lot of influence, and that's at the top of that administration.
Yeah, I think my highlight was they were trying to sign an agreement for safe AI and for everyone to collaborate, and pretty much the US and UK was like, no, you guys can do whatever you want, but we're not signing this. which
Exactly.
is
Yeah.
which is it's interesting because like even when they were doing that those what they call the coups, like the environmental ones, like people would just sign and agree on deadlines and shit and never achieve them anyway. So I don't know if it's better to say I'm not playing the game than create false expectations. And seeing the way that China mostly is evolving, signing anything like that would just put US in a slow pace move, or I wouldn't say in a halt, but yeah, the war is between China and the US. Like those are
Yeah,
the two main competitors right now.
exactly. And I guess kind of like to say it otherwise, I think the Europeans are just court parties in a war where they are not the main players. So
Yeah, exactly.
so that's essentially the way that it plays. And the message was like, well, you cannot create markets by just regulating them. So let it play out, and we're gonna play out because we want to be front runners in this.
Yeah,
And
it's like you have like two children running really fast on a bicycle, and then you have another one that is just learning to pedal, and he's saying, "Oh, let's create some rules for this game here because I can't catch up to you guys."
yeah, exactly. That's pretty much what is happening there in that relationship. And if the European, so that I think the message there was clear. It was like join us and deregulate, and let's play and innovate, or just use our tech, and we are going to use the full power of our economic pressures to make everybody kind of bow. That was really the idea behind it. It came in a semi threat way, but
Yeah.
pretty clear that they are not gonna let others dictate what their
Yeah.
companies do. Yeah.
It's pretty interesting, sort of the new role that US is playing now with Trump of saying, hey, look, guys, we've been working together for a while, but now I'm the fucking boss here.
That's pretty much it. And I mean, the UK being a long-term kind of partner of the US also doesn't want to be seen as an online partner, in whichever shape or form, which I find it quite interesting.
Well, of course not. They're not in the European Union anymore, so they need to ally with they need to be allied with someone, and I think the strongest player right now is the US, right? So if they start playing against the US, they have played against Europe, so they've got some negative points with Europe. if they do the same with the US,
Then
Trump
they
might do the same that he's doing to Canada and other countries, and they probably don't want to do that. Like I remember Trump said, someone asked, "Oh, are you gonna be putting taxes on imports from Europe?" And he said, "Oh, probably yes, Europe and the UK. I think the UK is gonna be easier because they're gonna play nice, but I'm still to see what's gonna happen with Europe." So yeah, so I think that's how the UK is positioning. Like, yeah, we'll be cool with you guys, which is interesting because um, yeah, the UK started the US, and now the US is sort of ruling the UK, right?
yeah. But it's been like this. That relationship has been like this for quite a while.
Yeah.
Anyways, moving on, maybe for something more like aligned with usually what we do here, which is a bit more like a geeky conversation. So Andre, maybe you want to talk to us a little bit more about the latest kind of like product reorganization within OpenAI. So I have two things here at the top of my head. So one is the GPT 4.5 model, which is just about to be launched, and then in the future also GPT 5. And yeah, do you wanna cover a little bit what
Yeah.
those two are about?
Yeah, so OpenAI came into a roadmap of having reasoning and non-reasoning models. So GPT 4.0 until now was the latest sort of non-reasoning model, and then we had O1. O1, we had O1 Mini and O1 Pro. O1 Pro was like the full potential of O1, but you needed to have the Pro account to use it, or else you could use the other versions of O1. And then OpenAI, after that whole story that came on DeepSeek, they released O3, and there's two models, well, three models on O3, so which is O3 Mini, O3 Mini High, and there's the O3 model. The O3 model, everyone would be expecting it to be released for pro users, but OpenAI has announced that they're not going to release the full O3.
Mm,
But they will release a next version for GPT 4.0, which is going to be GPT 4.5, and that's going to be the last non-reasoning model of the GPT sort of models.
sweet. Okay.
But they will go, so let's say the next version of O3 and 4.5 will be GPT-5, and GPT-5 is going to be like one single unified model to have everything. So like all the tools, voice search, canvas, deep search, image, everything. I don't know about image, but everything will be inside GPT 5, and they're gonna have the three tiers as they do currently, with the free users, the plus, and the pro. They haven't released what the differences are going to be between those three subscription models, if they're gonna be like utilization based on, or if they're gonna have, I don't think they're gonna have
Rate rate
multiple,
lim rate limits potentially as well.
yeah, rate limits or tokens or something like that. Or I don't know if they're gonna go down the path of having like a mini high and full. Not sure yet, but yeah, the idea is that everything will unify into one single model, which will be GPT-5. So that's sort of the roadmap that we know from OpenAI so far.
But will GPT-5 kind of include both the deep reasoning, deep search, and the traditional kind of like more generalistic models, or it's going to be a little bit more focused on the generalistic models and less so on that, deep reasoning.
The way that I think this is going to play out, I don't think they have given enough information for us to know fully how this is going to be, but all tools will be included in one model, which is going to be GPT-5. So like the Jeep research and everything will be in GPT-5. Um, I think the model will be a reasoning model out of the box, but to speed up on some of the, when you're using APIs and depending on the system, you want to
Mm.
have a fast response more than using reasoning. So
Yep.
they might have like mini versions that are faster and cheaper, but everything will be in one model. I don't think they will still have like anything that is non-reasoning. I think everything from now on, from GPT-5 on, will be reasoning models.
But maybe actually kind of like you can interact with the reasoning in a different format than the current reasoning models, right? Because the current reasoning models, they don't quite work that well when you're interacting with just kind of like iterative kind of like tasks where you kind of like you want just to obtain, for example, like, a writing on, I don't know, marketing material, whatever, and then kind of like you ask the reasoning model, you obtain completely different sets of answers, and the detail of those answers also are quite different. The way that actually both models operate. So I'm thinking here that they might, allow users to kind of like have some sort of like selection in the way that they want to see outputs.
Turn on, off reasoning or something like that. Don't know.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, it depends on how they build the model, right? Like, I don't think we have enough information to say that. But my experience is if you use Mini for like email drafting and stuff like that, like I've been using O3 more than O1, but O3 Mini. So to write emails, draft emails, that's really good. To write content, that's really good. And for coding, the Mini High seems to work quite well. So they
Mm-hmm.
might just merge everything into one. I don't know if they're gonna have like the actual differentiation. They might do, because that seems like their strategy on having lighter models, but they keep talking about roadmap to GPT-5. But even though like we have O3, O1, and we've got three options, which is mini high, and the full version. So they might do something similar with GPT-5, but everything is on the same basis of training and
Yep.
technology. I think that's how it's going to play out. But on the turning reasoning off, I feel like everything is moving towards reasoning. So I think the future with GPT-5 beyond everything will be reasoning based. At least that's my guess.
Yeah. Okay. And like, okay, that's perfect. And do we have like any dates on those releases for the moment, or?
No, they haven't given in any dates yet. They just shared the roadmap. But we know OpenAI have been working really fast and quick. So, and the pressure from China, I think a lot of those things will start coming out quite quickly. Um, they working on how to make things faster and cheaper, and increasing sort of the capacity. So I think things will move quite fast.
Yeah, I mean, they will have to drop their prices at some point in time to compete with some of those Chinese models, right? So that
Yeah,
thing.
and that's an interesting one, because so DeepSeek, for example, that's open source. I can run on my own computer if you've got GPUs. You can also use the DeepSeek app, which is completely free. And then if you go into the Alibaba side of things, they've got the Gwen models. They've got like the Gwen 2.5 Max, which is amazing. The same model is generating text and image and video. And for now, it's all free. You can use everything for free. So the strategy that China's playing, I don't know where the money is
Is that
coming from. It's from the government or what, but
acquisition probably, right?
yeah, I can see like countries like in South America and etc. that don't have a big problem with China, that have the same sort of relationship with China and the US, moving more into Chinese models. And even if you look at Microsoft is starting to embed some of those models in Azure. You can see, for example, the DeepSeek models are already in Azure. I don't know if I don't think the Gwen models are, but
No,
once
not.
they start having those in Azure and they're a lot cheaper to use, I think companies will trust. I don't think in the US, I know they have big regulations against using DeepSeek. You can get fined. I can't remember what the fine was, but it's quite expensive. So China is creating restrictions for people not to use Chinese models. But
Yeah, the
I
US, yeah. the US is creating those restrictions, right?
Yeah, but I feel like the Chinese strategy is a really good strategy of let's make good models that are really outperforming. Let's be in the top of the technology, make everything free, and probably when people start transitioning and relying a lot on China, they can charge whatever they want, right?
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting, actually, the case of Azure, right, with Microsoft, because Microsoft has always been a player of the last, quite a few cycles, actually quite close to the administration. I mean, they're of course not as to the American administration. They're not as, of course, as aggressive as Elon Musk and his Doge play, but they've always been there in the circle, and the fact that they are opening up to some of these other models is a kind of like a different take, I find. I've been myself kind of like playing a little bit with the different versions of GitHub Copilot, and now of course the Azure kind of like broke up that kind of like that exclusive relationship with OpenAI for the last few months, and now I start actually seeing an increasing number of offers from different players where you can just select which kind of like co-pilot you want to use, what kind of like provider, what kind of like model, and I assume, given what you're just saying, that also some of those Chinese models will start actually to be integrated there as well.
Yeah, and they are really starting, which is really, really interesting to see how this is playing out.
Yeah, yeah, I'm yeah looking forward to see it. So I think hooking up on a little bit the topic that you just discussed about how these models are evolving and how I guess the strategy of the future models of even like OpenAI are applying. I have like one thing. It's a new trendy thing that is coming out of the Silicon Valley that actually I found quite interesting here for us to cover. And have you ever heard of the term or the phrase vibe coding?
Vibe coding.
Yeah.
No, I have never heard this term.
Okay. So vibe coding is essentially an emerging kind of like approach to software development, where you leverage AI to write code based on like on intuitive prompts, and while you reduce the traditional kind of like coding expertise from you know software developers. And this is something that has been introduced by the co-founder of OpenAI, Andre Carpati, and the method utilizes actually tools for OpenAI, like OpenAI Composer and voice to text Super Whisper, to make programming a little bit more accessible. So essentially, what they're trying to do is actually give a little bit more power to users, to end users, where one big theme of software development for a long time has always been, like talking about user-centric design, etc., etc. Now that what I'm trying to say is like, instead of actually talking about user-centric design, but actually kind of being developed by developers, what if we actually make the people that actually build models and build essentially software not being actually software developers, but being the users themselves? So, so this is a bit of kind of like a new approach that is taking quite a bit of attention in Silicon Valley, and there are a few companies now that are starting to move in that direction, where it's an evolution of, I suppose it's a bit of like an evolution from no code or even low code to something a little bit more like the users develop what they want, and we try to reduce kind of like the input as much from traditional software developers, and I've been in that vibe of like what Canvas does to an extent, but Canvas still requires some technical expertise to evaluate the code, right? But here they were really kind of like trying to push like the users do. If it's to be user centric, then actually let the users actually do it instead of actually software developers.
Yeah, that's really good. I am trying to search. There is a tool that I have been playing with, but I just lost the name of it. I'll tell you in a few, but is it's pretty much what you're saying. Like you can use Gen AI to code for you, and on the fly you can see the results. But move to the next topic, and once I remember the name, I'll let you know.
Um, yeah. Yeah. So one other thing that I found interesting um, is is a research that Anthropic did on their own users of their own models, and they built this thing that is called the Anthropic Economic Index.
Hmm.
So essentially, what they are doing there is that actually they are analyzing the impact of AI on labor markets and on the broader economy over the time. And and essentially they kind of like, there's the whole, again, society aspect around, being scared of like AI taking over, replacing a whole bunch of people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And what they did is like say, okay, let's look into the data. Let's look into the reality of who is actually using this. What are they using it for? And what is the future outcomes that we can see from actual users rather
Hmm.
than assumptions about tasks and different types of labor kind of like being replaced by AI. And it's quite interesting, the outputs that you get from that Anthropic Economic Index. What they're essentially saying is that the majority of people that actually are using AI are essentially software developers and data scientists,
Right,
and pretty
right.
much nobody else. So, and most of the things that they are automating is their own jobs, not necessarily the jobs of others. So
Hmm.
it's it's kind of interesting because we kind of like, because we live in the world of technology, both you and I, we do things deeply embedded in technology. We do extrapolate the impacts of it by saying, well, it's happening to us. We see this thing happening everywhere. So it must be happening with the economy overall. And some of this, the research that Anthropic did is actually, no, actually, it's happening for the people that are in the bubble.
I thought it would be for almost everyone to write emails.
Yeah, well, everyone writing emails, there might be a case as people start integrated, but other than that, for a lot of tasks that different people do, actually the impact has been quite low, but the impact has been big on the people that actually write software for a living.
Wow.
So, which, if you consider that is roughly, I think, about 30 to 40 million developers in the world, is actually a small size of the population relative to the other 8 billion people that live on Earth, right? So, and they are the ones that actually are writing things for automating, but they are not actually like automating all of their things. They are essentially, most of their applications being around enhancing their own capabilities, and less than 50% of it, according to research, is directed towards fully automating the job end to end.
Yeah.
Um, so it's quite interesting. I found very interesting and insightful because there's been a whole bunch of reports over the last couple of years since OpenAI launched its GPT-3 model, that that's it. It's the end, and essentially, kind of doesn't seem to be that way. People people from a vast array of professions are actually not using these models on a day-to-day basis. They
Which is really interesting. Like you see the big techs reducing the number of developers, getting more, how do you say, productive. So it's interesting. The tool that I was thinking of, Will, is Cursor AI. Cursor AI is quite good. Like
Mm.
you can use Gen AI prompts, and you for development it works really really well. I think it's better than GitHub for people that are developing things in AI.
Okay.
And it's really cool to hear about the report and the impact. So maybe it's not the end of the world yet, but at some point I think there will be a big pivot because AI is getting smarter, 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 and it just do things a lot more efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but yeah, but we see, when I look around me, I kind of like see that people are using it, but they're not using fully in the way that most kind of like software developers actually kind of like thinking about things these days. So that's the main takeaway from that research, which I'm sure other companies will be providing their own kind of like inputs at some point in time about their own users. But Anthropic has done a pretty deep dive into their user base, so that's very insightful.
Cool. All right. If you stayed all the way to the end, write entropic on the comments. Thank you for listening to us. Keep posted if you want to learn about AI and just be on top of everything that is going on in the world of AI, emerging tech, blockchain, etc. Keep listening to our podcast. Thanks for your audience. Thanks for your time, Will, and I'll see you next week.
I'll see you next week. So I'll send you guys as well the links to some of the things that we should discuss today, so that you can have a read or put into an AI prompt and actually kind of like get it a little bit more distilled for you. But yeah, I looking forward to our next chat.
All right. See ya.
See ya.